All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, again, another different environment today. We've got a special guest with us. Can you do the honours?
Well, we're at Bradford Bulls, and it's a pleasure to be here, and in particular to be joined by the Chief Executive of Bradford Bulls, Jason Hirst. And we're going to talk to Jason about all sorts of things. Bradford Bulls, obviously. We're going to talk about Jason himself and how he came to be in the position that he now holds. And we're going to talk about Rugby League generally with him. So I think it's going to be a really interesting insight into, you know, running a championship club such as Bradford Bulls and the particular issues that Jason faces. So Jason, welcome to the podcast, and I hope you enjoy the next 45 minutes or so.
Well, thank you, Martyn. Thank you, Jake. I certainly will enjoy the next 45 minutes, I'm sure. And I thank you for the opportunity to chat about all things Rugby League this afternoon.
It's marvellous, yeah.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, you said to us before the episode, you've been in the position now for 2 years. I guess, have you always been involved in Rugby League, or how did that opportunity come about for you, Jason?
I have always been involved in Rugby League, but not professionally. I first started playing as a 9-10-year-old at a local Bradford club about 500 yards down the road called Sedgeburg. I played for a number of years until approximately 28 years old. I was never much good as a player, if I'm being honest.
What position did you play, Jason?
Wherever there was a space. I'd like to say I was a utility player, probably more a utensil player. I like to play halfback, but wherever I got picked, I played and I did my best. But I was no great shakes, even at what we then called an amateur level. I then took a bit of a break from the sport in terms of stop playing because of work commitments, and then out of the blue I got offered a coaching opportunity, and then I spent 10 years coaching at 4 different Bradford community clubs at open age level.
Which clubs were there? Can you just remind us?
Yeah, so from 2005 for 3 seasons I coached Wyke, a club I played at as a junior and open age. So I was at Wyke from 2005 for 3 years. I then resigned from that role because I was exhausted. I felt as though I'd taken the team and the club as far as I could. And I expected that to be the end of it. But I was fortunate enough that West Bowling picked the phone up to me, and I went and coached at West Bowling for 2 years.
And they play just up the hill there?
Yeah.
Just there, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did 2 years at West Bowling. Then I moved on to Birkenshaw. I'd also played at West Bowling, so Wyke and West Bowling I had some affinity with. I then went to Birkenshaw, a club I'd not played at, and I didn't know too much about them, but they were a great set of people. I did 2 years at Birkenshaw, and then I moved on again to another club that's about a mile and a half up the road, Wibsey. And I coached at Wibsey for 3 years. During that, we transitioned from a winter team to a summer team. So I coached at 4 clubs. I wised up pretty quickly on coaching that, you know, when you win, it's all down to players. And when you lose, it's nothing to do with players, it's all to do with coach. So I jumped around before anybody could sack me. I moved on. But I did 10 years. I think it's fair to say I was a better coach than player, but I didn't set a high bar as a player. So no, thoroughly enjoyed it. Then again, took a break from the sport. I'd done 10 years. I'd had enough of coaching. I needed a rest and something else. And then out of the blue, I got the opportunity to join the Bradford Bulls.
Yeah, absolutely. Was your family a Rugby League family? Did you follow your dad into supporting Bradford, or was it something a bit different from that?
It was very different. So my dad was a Leeds fan. I'm not sure why he was a Leeds fan, but he was a Leeds fan. My granddad on my mum's side was a big Fartown fan, big Huddersfield fan.
Right.
And I had a good close relationship with my granddad, and it was my granddad who brought me to my first ever professional game here at Odsal in 1976 in November from memory against Salford. We won that day, and I was hooked, and I've been coming here ever since.
Right, marvellous. So I suppose in those days you would never have imagined that one day you'd be sitting here. Well, of course, this building that we're in at the moment wasn't here in those days. The stadium was sort of when the terracing went all around the stadium. But so how did you come? You know, what brings you here now as chief executive? How did that happen?
So let me think back. Let me get this right. So in 2021, I think we were just coming out of COVID from memory, and I happened to bump into the chairman, Nigel Wood, at a funeral. I'd played rugby in the same team as Nigel as an amateur, and he said, "Oh, I've got a proposition for you. Are you free for a chat?" So I met him, and he asked me if I'd like to come on board as the club's director of youth and academy.
Right.
It was a position that the club didn't currently have, and basically I was tasked, amongst other things, with helping the club regain its elite academy licence because it had been temporarily revoked. So I came in and did a year as youth and academy director. That was on a part-time basis, so it was I worked half a mile down the road, so it were nipping up on my dinner time, doing an hour, doing 3 or 4 hours after work, and then working weekend. And then that went okay. We, thanks to the hard work of many people, in particular Ryan Hunkin as head of youth, we got his elite academy licence back,
which was a great achievement, actually, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, because at that time, well, certainly even now, we're the only part-time team in the country who run an elite
non-Super
academy.
League club.
Yeah, and we don't get any funding for that. So Ryan Hunkin in particular did a great job in getting that licence back, and then that allowed me then to accept an offer from the club to become CEO. I was still working full-time at that point. I was 53. I'd thought about retiring, and I was going to give it a couple more years, but Nigel convinced me to give it a crack as being the CEO, so I promptly retired at the end of April. Had a week off, and then from May 2022, I've been I've been full-time volunteer CEO.
I mean, it's a club with a fantastic history, is Bradford, and that history includes being the World Club champions. The last time was in 2006 at Huddersfield when you beat the West Tigers, which was a fantastic achievement, wasn't it? But since then, it's been a story of gradual decline and then actually, traumatic decline, really, with the club having gone into administration and liquidation, then been relegated to League One and having to fight its way back again. And now, of course, you're performing very creditably in the Championship. But, you've inherited a really difficult situation, Jason.
Absolutely, and you're quite right that we won the World Championship in 2006. We also won it in 2002, 2004. And those were the dizzy heights of Bullmania and Robbie Paul and cheerleaders and all
Absolutely.
the razzmatazz. And since then, the club's been on a sort of rather rapid downward slope, certainly until 2020. So it was a huge challenge, but my whole life I've been motivated by challenges and by people doubting my ability to do something. And I've got a undying love for this club since I came to my first match watching the Northern in 1976. And when the opportunity was offered to me, it just appealed, and I was fortunate enough to be able to be in a position where I could give up work. So it just ticked all the boxes, and I wake up every morning and I go to bed every night thinking about what can we do better and how soon can we get back to Super League.
Just tell me one thing in relation to the history of this club. You were obviously a young guy in the mid-1990s when summer rugby arrived. And this club changed. You just mentioned Northern, and it changed its name to the Bulls. As a supporter at that time, did you support that move?
Absolutely not.
No. I thought you might not have done.
I'm a bit of a traditionalist at heart, but I do recognise the need for change, and I welcome and embrace change. I always have. But I've always been at heart a Bradford Northern fan. So I remember when the name change was announced, I was like, I'm not going to go watch them. But I quickly got over that and, showed a more mature outlook. And, I've been coming all the time. In retrospect, looking back now to 1996, 28 years ago, it was the best thing club's ever done in my lifetime. The late, great Peter Deakin were obviously instrumental in that. And it just transformed the club. I remember coming here in Northern days, even when we were successful, there were 4,000 to 5,000, But it was winter rugby and it was cold and it was damp, and then suddenly
it has its own microclimate. This place,
absolutely,
doesn't it?
absolutely. But on the stadium gets bagged and criticised, and I understand why. It's constructive and it's right, but I still firmly believe on a summer's day like we had against Barrow at the weekend, there isn't a better place to watch rugby league in the sun than Odsal.
There's no doubt it's an iconic stadium, isn't it? And last time I was here, I was here for a game a few weeks ago, and met a couple. Well, I met actually three quite elderly ladies who were. It was when Bradford played Halifax at home over the Easter period, and I was invited by Nigel to to join him in the director's lounge, and there were three ladies from Halifax there, all as I say, quite elderly, but all of them had been here on that day in 1954 in May, when Warrington played Halifax in front of an official crowd of 102,569, and they were telling me of their memories of that day, and it just was so incredible to meet people who had been here on such a wonderful day for this incredible old stadium. And you must, we'll never bring those days back. We'll never see a crowd of that amount here again, but it must be terrific motivation to bring back some of the glory years that there used to be at this club.
Absolutely, it's my sole focus. You mentioned the 1954. My granddad and my dad, who I mentioned earlier, were both at that game. More recently, I think off the top of my head, it was 24,020, which was then a Super League record when we played Leeds and beat them.
I was here that night.
Yeah. I've got to get in that we beat them as a Bradford lad. And we're not that club anymore, and I'm very realistic that we're not that club anymore. But this club's on an upward trajectory. It's stabilised over the last 4 years after the well-documented liquidations, administrations, and we're slowly building. And I firmly believe that we will be back in Super League sooner rather than later, and that's my challenge and my motivation.
That's right.
Every single day.
Jake, you're seeing this stadium for the first time as an Aussie coming, over here. Yeah. You're seeing a lot of English stadiums for the first time. What do you make of Odsal?
I was blown away by just the depth of where the field is, like the ground level. It really is a big bowl, like you said, Martin. And you said in the car park, it's like a natural amphitheatre almost. And I think that viewing angle is perfect for rugby league. I was blown away. We're driving up along the road here. I'm not sure what that road is, but I didn't realise, how deep it actually went. And I've never seen anything like it.
No.
It's probably, and you mentioned, Martin, it's kind of like the Allegiant Stadium where they played the Vegas
Las Vegas, yes,
with the narrower field. But it's sort of blew me away a little bit. It's I'll have to come watch a game.
Well, you can come watch a game anytime, Jay. Just get in touch with me. But you're right, it's an amphitheatre. It's gladiatorial, and what sport, symbolises gladiatorial behaviours, better than rugby league, with possible exception of boxing. It's an iconic stadium. I'm 55 years old, and from the day I was born, I'm sure there were stories then about it becoming the Wembley of the North, and there's so much potential in this ground because of how big it is, its network, motorway networks. It's half a mile down road and you're on motorway. What it needs is vision and money. And whilst we've got vision, unfortunately we haven't got deep enough pockets to redevelop it.
Do you think that will ever happen though? Because as you say, we've had all these stories and rumours going back years that this stadium is going to be redeveloped, and so far nothing's happened. We've had levelling up funds for the north of England. Levelling up funds are being applied in various places, but very sadly not here. Do you think there's ever a chance that something will happen to this stadium?
I know people will disagree with what I'm about to say, and they'll say, you're a bit of a dreamer, but yes, I do. How soon that'll be, I obviously don't know. I think any redevelopment has got to be realistic. When we spoke about the levelling up bid, it were all about training pitches with car parks on top. For the Bradford Bulls, and I'm talking from a Bradford Bulls perspective, what do we want here at Odsal Stadium? We want a 21st century stadium. We want a stadium where people can stand or sit under cover if they want to, so that they're not getting wet, that they can have a drink in comfort, they can have some nice food. I think, there's been talk of, 50,000 capacities. We don't need that as a part-time Championship club, even as a full-time Super League club, which we will become again. A ground that holds 15,000 is more than enough, because it creates that fear of missing out. If you're playing in a 50,000 seat stadium,
sure,
people can decide at last minute whether to go. They'll look at the weather and think, oh, it's raining, I'll watch it on telly. 15,000, 21st century, modern facility is what not only the Bradford Bulls are crying out for, but the city of Bradford.
Well, a lot of people, the city of Bradford, we were saying off camera before the podcast began that, the city of Bradford has a reputation that to a very significant degree is undeserved, really. Some people don't even like to admit that they come from Bradford, which seems absurd to me. But, do you think there is this sort of view of Bradford that's really unjustified, Jason? As a whole, not just Bradford Bulls, but Bradford as a whole.
Yeah, I'm a proud Bradfordian. I've never lived more than 3 miles from this stadium where we're sat today. I'm fiercely proud and patriotic about Bradford. Certainly it's got its challenges, but every other city has. I think there is an element of giving a dog a bad name and it getting a stigma that's hard to shake off. But we're a club that's out in the community every single week, and I see what local volunteers are doing, be it with disadvantaged children, be it with dementia cafes, etc., etc. The people of Bradford are absolutely superb. They're the salt of the earth. I have friends who aren't from Bradford, and we have Australian players who come and play for us this season, and the one thing that they all say is that the people of Bradford are so welcoming and so friendly and so open to working hard and trying to achieve things. So I do think it's an undeserved reputation that we've got in Bradford, but once again that just makes me even more determined to bring good times back to not only the Bradford Bulls but to the wider city of Bradford.
And you've sort of spoken about your goal to eventually become a Super League team again. Is this something that you want to put a time frame on, or is it you can't quite possibly put a time frame on at this stage?
That's a really good question, and I'm giving a little bit of debate as to how I answer that, because I know if I say by this year,
yep,
people will perhaps deride me, and then if we don't achieve it, it'll be, you said that. I think it's a realistic but stretching target that we can be back there in 2 years. We're entering into a different era for Rugby League, IMG. Super League's currently 12 clubs. On the scoring mechanism that came out and the provisional gradings, we were 14th. One thing that really stood out to me in the gradings of all the 30 odd professional clubs were the biggest gap was from 14th to 15th. To me, it's a natural progression for Super League to go to 14 teams, and whether that be Bradford or someone else in 14th place, it just seems a natural progression, because we have these loop fixtures that are hugely unpopular with fans and broadcasters alike. So to me it makes perfect sense to go to 14, and there's a clear top 14 teams based on last year's gradings. But if we were 15th, I'd still be saying that. I think the natural progression is to go to 14 teams to refresh Super League, so that there isn't the same monotony of matches, if you like.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. But the problem is that the Super League clubs who are there at the moment, they get, their share of the revenue from the Sky Broadcasting deal, and they're not willing to share it, 2 additional ways, are they? And that's the problem, really. That too many decisions in this game at the highest level are actually made by the clubs, who are acting in their own short-term interests rather than in the interests of the game as a whole and longer term, the longer term good of the game. And that's really frustrating, I find, and it must be frustrating for you in your position at the moment.
I think it is frustrating. I can understand why. The sport's not awash with cash. So, if I'm sat in Super League, I can understand why they want that pie to be shared out between 12 clubs. I do get it, but I do think it's short-sighted. I think sometimes you've got to take a step back to take 2 steps forward. I think the big challenge is the French teams, because Toulouse, I think, scored 10th in the IMG, so there's a good chance that next year there could be a 12-team Super League with 2 French teams in it. I think that's a topic that needs addressing. I think, personally, I welcome French teams in Super League, but they've got to be able to put in as much as they're taking out, just like the UK-based teams have to do. They don't bring in the revenue through subscriptions to Sky like the English teams do. I think they were a review 3 or 4 years ago before I got involved in the professional sport, where they looked at France and I believe that clubs were told to stick by the French because they will start to bring more money in and they're going to host the 2025 World Cup. Well, that's no longer the case. So my challenge would be what is the plan for the French teams? Who's in charge of it? And what are the French teams bringing back into the competition? Yes, they bring, good sides. Catalans are a great side. And I want to see Rugby League in France playing in England, the Catalans, etc. But they've got to be able to contribute back into the sport. And if not, then I think the Rugby League, have got a difficult decision there. Maybe if the French teams brought more money in, the pie would be bigger, and then the Super League owners would then be willing to split it 40 in ways because there'd still be the same amount of pie, if you like.
Or the alternative is to have 14 clubs, including 2 French clubs, and those French clubs only get a modified distribution that, reflects their situation.
Absolutely. I think fundamentally I'm in agreement with that, but it's obviously not that simple. I think
it is that simple, actually. But I think that's dead simple. But
I think for us maybe it is. But if you spoke to Super League CEOs or chairman, they'd maybe tell you something different.
Well, they might do, but we would argue with them, wouldn't we? And I think they'd be wrong if they contradicted that view. But we can't. We can't get rid of the French clubs, in my view, Jason, because that would be. We're still hoping that the French will be able to give us a decent game at test level, and we'll see that later this month, of course, won't we? And there are quite a number of young French players coming through into the game now. Obviously, we would like to see far more, but better some than none at all. So it's frustrating, but. What I'm curious about with this club here, Jason, is you get a very small distribution nowadays. I think it's about 150,000 a year.
That's correct.
From the centre. You, as far as I'm aware, you haven't got a fabulously wealthy benefactor who tops that up to any significant degree. And yet you run, I think, the last count, 9 teams, is it, altogether?
That's correct, yes.
Including physical disability, learning disability, women's academy, you name it, you run it, which is a very expensive thing to do. How do you square that particular financial circle?
With great difficulty. You mentioned the 9 teams. We as a club, the board of directors and all the staff are fiercely proud of that. I don't think we get the credit we deserve for it, be it on his own doorstep or wider. To run 9 teams is a massive financial undertaking for a part-time championship team who, quite rightly, as you've pointed out, Martyn, don't have a rich benefactor. What we do have, we have a board of 5 directors, including myself, 4 of which are shareholders. Not me, but the other 4 directors are. They put their hard-earned money into the club. None of us take a wage. Why do we do it? Because it's the right thing to do. And why is it the right thing to do? First and foremost, we want to be a good corporate citizen. We're all, fiercely proud Bradfordians that are running this club. We know some of the challenges that face youngsters growing up in Bradford, so we want to give them the opportunity to play rugby league at an elite academy level. We also want to give, young ladies and, elder women, the opportunity to play rugby league, as well as disabled people with learning disabilities. We think it's the right thing to do. It's also the right thing to do for us because, as I've alluded to more than once, we will get back to Super League and we will be full-time. And when we get there, whilst understanding that there'll be a transition period, we don't want to be just there making up the numbers. We want to be a force again. And having all those teams can only help support that. But I do get challenged by supporters saying, you tell me that it's £140,000 to run an elite academy, which it is. Why don't you pump that money into first team and have a better first team?
That's always what fans will say, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a very fair question. But equally, when we lost his academy licence, his elite academy licence, and when there's rumours that we're going to fold it because of the cost, as fans are up in arms. So it's a very difficult one, but we're fully committed to our academy. We're really proud of what we do. We've got a proven track record in producing quality players.
There are two words that I can say that, end the argument about whether you should have an academy or not. And those two words are Sam Burgess. He came through your academy. I mean, what better recommendation is there? And he's not the only one by any means, of course, because all his brothers came here as well. And there are lots more players who went on to have great careers and are still doing that, who started as Bradford Bulls Academy kids.
Absolutely. You've got Liam Price, who's now retired, for example, but still playing. John Bateman, who's a great friend of this club. Elliot Whitehead, Canberra captain. We produce players and we always have and we always will. It's harder when you're in the Championship because young lads get offered a Super League club, be it Leeds Rhinos that way or be it Huddersfield Giants that way. Full-time Super League club, it's more attractive at face value than the Bradford Bulls. So I understand that we don't get the cream of the crop, but we still produce quality young players. Young Jacob Bayman made his debut against Sheffield 2 weeks ago. He's come through our academy system. He played at Birkenshaw, one of the clubs I used to coach. And we will produce more players. And when we're back in Super League, we will start to get the cream of the crop. We'll be on a more level playing field with his neighbours at Huddersfield and Leeds.
Absolutely, yeah.
It'd be interesting to see, players that have come through your academy, whether they'd like to come back to the club once you do reach that Super League status. I think it'd be a great incentive for them to come back and play for the club that, put so much investment into them.
I think they would, and without revealing any names, we've spoken to a player this week who's told us that out of all the clubs he's played for, there's only one club he'd come back to, and that would be the Bradford Bulls. This club looks after people. We've taken in a lone player, Jaden Ockenberg, and he's absolutely loving it here because he gets looked after. He came into the shop the other week, and then I went to our training base about an hour later, and he was saying, "Oh, that lady, she was great. Will you pass on my thanks?" This is a club that looks after people, and people come and people go, and some people leave and say, "Oh, it's better, I want to go. I've had enough of it." But yeah, that's okay. We're on a journey. Some people get left behind,
of course,
and that's just life.
And with the academies, that's not really taken much into consideration with your gradings, is it?
No, we backed IMG like approximately 90% of the clubs did. So it's about raising standards, is IMG, and we're all for that. That said, we don't think it's the perfect model, and
no.
There's a number of areas where we think it could be better.
Well, let's explore that a bit, Jason, because, for example, I've noticed that your club has markedly improved its digital output on social media, in the last 12 months, let's say. I'm constantly being bombarded on TikTok with videos that your club produces, and because I joined TikTok fairly recently, and the club that seems to get onto my TikTok feed more than any other is your club, actually. But it's great. It's great that people are improving their digital output, and that's IMG has had a lot to do with that. But how do you monetize that? You know, it's one thing having a great digital output, a great social media presence, but how do you turn that into your financial advantage?
It's a good question, and I want to start out by just giving a shout to his media manager who's just done a presentation for me and the rest of the board. He's doing a great job, so thank you, Luke. How do we maximise that and turn it into cash? We get sponsors through it. You know, a gentleman approached me 3 months ago who's a big football fan, and he does a lot of sponsorship at Leeds United, and he said, "You're all over social media." He says, "You're all over it, Jason." He said, I can't go on a platform where you're not in my face." He said, "And that's what my business needs." So on back of that, you know, we struck up a sponsorship deal.
Nice. That's great.
So it's not just about ticking boxes for IMG for us. It's about getting out there and showing people what we can do and building new partnerships with new sponsors. Equally, you know, youngsters, you know, when I was young and when you were mine, there were no Facebook, and you mentioned TikTok.
No.
I wouldn't know TikTok if it hit me in the face. I wouldn't know how to get TikTok. But you know, the world's changing, and youngsters are all over social media, and we need to attract a new, younger, more diverse fan base. So us being all over social media really pleases me because we have got an ageing fan base.
But you do, but are you seeing any younger people coming though? That's the thing, because, as I say, it's one thing having a great social media output, TikTok and so on, and it's great that you're getting drawing sponsorship because of that. That's really great to hear. But are you drawing any of these younger people in to Odsal Stadium on game day?
We are, but not to the extent that I'd like.
No.
You know, it isn't just through social media. So approximately 18 months ago, we went out to 152 local schools promoting the Bulls, giving free tickets, etc., etc. So we are attracting new people and children, but not to the extent that I'd like us to, and not to the extent that we need to. You know, it's a cliche, but, you know, kids are the future. You know, they're the future
they are,
fans.
Yes, they are. I'm only too conscious of that myself, actually, at my age. But yeah, it is true. But again, one of the other problems that you face in Bradford is the sort of demographic makeup of the city, with a lot of people of ethnic South Asian origin. And they're a tough nut to crack, aren't they, in terms of getting them to come along and support the club. We've had a lot of clubs with a significant Asian population hoping to attract more of them, and it'd be great if you could. But are you making any inroads into that market, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're at the forefront in Rugby League. You know, we held an Eid event here. We've held so many events. We've reached out to so many school children. You know, you mentioned Asian backgrounds, any background. We're reaching out to people of Asian, you know, backgrounds, Polish backgrounds, English backgrounds. You know, we don't discriminate. We want to be diverse. We do have more and more Asians coming to the games, but is it proportionately the right amount given the size of Bradford and a large Asian community? No, it's not. But that's just one area where we continue to work hard to bring about change. But you know, that
what
goes
you could do
all.
with is a young Asian kid who turns out to be a superstar, couldn't you?
Well, you know, Ikram Butt was the first Asian to
but
play for England.
It was, and I always thought a lot of Asian kids would follow in his footsteps, but so far it hasn't happened to anything like the degree that I would have hoped.
No, it hasn't, and that's disappointing and surprising. I mentioned Ikram because, you know, the British Asian team, we hold at this ground on pre-matches, you know, warm-ups plenty of times a year. We also have schools that are predominantly Asian who come and train or have PE lessons on the famous Odsal turf, and that's through us foundation, who do great work out in community. You know, our traditional fan base is South Bradford, where we sit today, and then down in Heckman, Dwight and Cleckheaton. But the north of Bradford is an untapped area for us, and we're reaching out and we're going out into schools there trying to address that, because sport, and rugby league in particular, is an inclusive sport, and you know, we welcome people from every background.
Well, it always has been. Yeah,
absolutely.
It always has been. We have a proud record as a sport in that regard, don't we? And that's true of here and in Australia, isn't it? When you look at it.
No, absolutely. But yeah, I guess with the way the team's going at the moment, mate, are you kicking goals this year? Are you ticking off some of those goals that you sort of set for yourself at the start of the season?
Yes. We 2 years ago we finished 9th, which was disastrous and not acceptable. So we've made a lot of changes in the football department since then. That saw us finish 3rd last year. Which were, good. The aim this year was to finish in the top 3 again. I think it was well documented that our first 5 matches were particularly hard. From memory, I think we had Halifax, Featherstone, Toulouse, Widnes. I can't remember the other one. We've played 10 games. We've won 6 and lost 4. On the face of it, that's not brilliant. I think to give some kind of perspective, we lost 2 of those games by a point, including Batley 2 weeks ago, where we missed a kick from under the sticks in the last minute, albeit from quite a way out. I think if we win those 2 games, we're in 2nd and everybody's happy. I think, just speaking to Wayman less than 30 minutes ago in his board meeting, he said that he'd never known as many injuries at one club at any one time. I think the minimum amount of players we've had out from our first team squad this year has been 6. We've had as many as 12 out. 7 or 8 of them had been a starting 13. So factoring everything in, I think we've had a good solid start. I think we'll kick on now that we're getting players back, and our realistic target at the start of this year were not to finish any lower than what we did last year, and I firmly believe that we're on track to achieve that.
And Jason, what do you think about the quality of the Championship as a competition? Because one of the disappointments for me is that it is a great competition, and whenever I've been to a Championship game, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, whether here or anywhere else. But it's not got a TV contract at the moment. One was offered, wasn't it? But it seems that Premier Sports were keen to televise every game, actually, on a streaming basis, but not to pay anything for doing that. And so it was turned down by the clubs, quite rightly in my view, because you can't give your product away for nothing, and that would have meant that fans could have just not come to the stadium, but could have just taken a subscription to them and watched every game on there. So that was an unrealistic offer, I think. But it would be nice to think that there were some realistic ones somewhere.
Yeah, and I think to take your first point first, the Championship's a great competition. I'm obviously a little bit biased because we are in the Championship, but I think out of the Super League, Championship and League One, the Championship is the best. Why do I say that? I base it on facts. Last season, going into the last match of the season, I think there was only one team who didn't have something to play for in terms of finishing in the top 2 or top 4 or avoiding relegation or getting into the playoffs. It's a really exciting competition where anybody, with a possible exception at the moment of Wakefield, who are full-time, and have got a Super League squad, really. They've obviously got a rich benefactor that we spoke about earlier that we don't have.
Yes.
It's a great competition where anybody can beat anybody on any given day. I think the TV deal, it did split opinion amongst the Championship clubs, more or less 50-50. We were steadfast and vehement in our rejection of the proposal. Why were we against it? Is it because we're short-sighted? Absolutely not. It'd bring some obvious benefits having the Championship matches on TV, but to have every single match, we worked out that we'd get £330 a game. So it only takes 15 people not to turn up and we're losing money. I were quite vocal and quite clear when we met with the Championship clubs and the RFL. If we don't value our competition, how can we expect anybody else to? And I were quite offended that, we were getting asked to accept a deal where we'd have lost money.
Yes, of course.
We've got a great sport and the Championship's a great sport. And if Premier Sport or any other TV company wants to show it, then great, but pay the going rate.
And would broadcasting your own games for your fans, say on like a subscription-based model, is that something that you guys have looked at or you think clubs should explore?
I think clubs should explore it, and I think each club's different. I think for the Bradford Bulls, it doesn't work, certainly for us home matches. I think for matches in Toulouse, we did it last year when we got into the playoff semi-final, and it worked. We had a below where we sat now, we had 300 or 400 people watching it. But fundamentally for us, no, we want people coming through the turnstiles, experiencing rugby league and everything else that we do at this stadium, all the entertainment, the face painting for children, the bouncy castles, the live music. We want people to come and have a good day out whilst helping us improve our squad, because the more people who come through the turnstiles, the better it is for us. I think, rugby league it's well known that, it's not a rich sport, and what clubs really need, they need people through the turnstiles, and we need RL Commercial selling the sport better than what we are doing, and particularly the Championship.
Do you think they're doing that, though? Because I don't hear much from RL Commercial, really, in terms of commercial deals that they might be negotiating with anyone.
No,
maybe I'm just not well informed, and maybe they are, and they're not telling us.
I think there's something to be said. And you make a really pertinent point. I don't want to sit here and say, what RL Commercial should or shouldn't be doing. I'm sure they've got a difficult job, but basing it on facts again, the television deal is circa 20 million. 4 or 5 years ago, I'm not sure on the exact timing, but 4 or 5 years ago, it was 40 million. So it shrunk by 50%. So my question is, what are we doing to address that 20 million? Who's doing it, and what's the plan, and where are we against that target? We should be looking to bring that 20 million in, because whilst it's not there, it's going to fall on club owners to keep putting in their hard-earned money, and that can't last forever.
No, and it's interesting that your chairman here, Nigel Wood, he was the chief executive of the RFL when they were getting 40 million a year, and he actually negotiated that deal, didn't he?
He did, yeah. I mean, I wasn't involved at the club, but I know that he negotiated that deal.
Directly with Sky.
And, I think people now look back and think, we got 40 million when he were there negotiating. We're now getting 20 million. I think sometimes you don't know what you've got until it's gone. And I'm sure that there's people in the sport, and I know that there's people in the sport, are asking that question.
You don't know what you've got till it's gone. A famous line from Joni Mitchell's song, isn't it, that one? Yeah, you're absolutely right. But, I mean, do you think... I mean, you're at the coalface, really, in Rugby League, Jason. You're running a club with all the worries and tribulations and difficulties that throws up. Do you think you're getting the right degree of support from the centre?
I think there could be more support. I know they've got an extremely difficult job. But we need more. We need more from RL Commercial and from the RFL to get out there and sell our sport. And I know the challenge back could be, well, the TV deal for the Championship would have, potentially have done that. But, the Championship's a great spectacle, and we shouldn't undersell it. And there's a lot of onus on owners at part-time Championship clubs to, keep clubs going, and money runs out, and that's why we couldn't afford to lose people through the turnstiles that we firmly believe we would have done if each and every one of our games had been on the TV.
Well, let's just assume, I think we're drawing to a close, Jason, aren't we, fairly soon, but we've had a very good discussion, but let's just assume that Bill Gates is watching this podcast and is anxious to invest in a sports club somewhere in the world.
I'm sure he is. He would be watching.
One of the richest men in the world. Well, let's assume he's watching, or maybe somebody not quite as rich as him. But Jason, if you were pitching to somebody to invest in Bradford, which I think it would be a great investment actually here for anybody who's wealthy and wants to make a positive impact in society. What would be your pitch?
I'd say that Bradford as a whole, not just the Bradford Bulls, is a sleeping giant with so much potential that needs to be unlocked. I'd point to the fact that, we're almost 30 years in to Super League and the summer era, and there's only 4 clubs ever won the Super League, and we're one of them, and we've won it on more than one occasion. We've won the World Club Championship 3 times, which we alluded to earlier. We've got a stadium that can hold 25,000. It's a sleeping giant. It's a club that's on an upward trajectory. It's a club that will be back in Super League and will be full-time sooner rather than later. But it is a club that is run and staffed by volunteers such as myself. And, money does talk. You're not going to get rich, and perhaps it's in the sales pitch. You don't get rich by investing in rugby league clubs. But I think what we do as a club in the local community, you can't put a price on it. I get people every single week writing to me saying the Bradford Bulls have made my child's day. Rugby league is a force for good. It installs great principles about teamwork, respect and hard work, and the Bradford Bulls is a great brand. Super League is stronger for Bradford Bulls because of our fan base. So if you're out there watching, Mr. Bill Gates, I might not assault it good enough, but if you want to give me a call, I'd more than happily talk to you.
Bill Gates or anybody else who happens to be watching.
What I will say is the Bradford Bulls brand that you just sort of touched on there, you're absolutely right, because I grew up in Australia. We knew of some of the big Super League clubs, Leeds, St Helens. Bradford was one of those clubs that fans in Australia knew about, and that was because of their early success and them obviously playing in World Club Challenges. But it'd be a shame to see no support or limited support from the governing body to try and help get you guys back up to Super League, I think.
I'm not sure on that because, we don't want any special help. There's plenty of other championship clubs who want to get to Super League, and there's teams in League One who probably want to do the same. So we're not asking for any help, specifically for the Bulls. What we want to work with all the other clubs, Championship, Super League, League One and the RFL and Rugby League commercial to help grow the game. There is a £20 million deficit from the TV deal, and I like many other CEOs at Championship and Super League clubs want to know what are we doing to address that £20 million shortfall, and who's doing it and where are we on this journey. The sport cannot afford to lose £20 million. It's not football, it's rugby league. And there's challenges facing the sport. And, it's challenging for the RFL, it's challenging for rugby league commercial, but it's also challenging for owners and volunteers such as myself.
Absolutely. Can I just ask you one last question, Jason? And it linked to the ground. We all know that Bradford Bulls don't own the stadium, but the RFL bought it from Bradford some years ago, and now it's for sale again. The RFL is selling its stake in this stadium. Are you confident that you might, as a club, end up with the ground in your own hands again before too long?
Yeah, so where we are with that is that the RFL own the lease to the stadium, so they don't own the stadium. They don't
own the freehold.
Yeah, it's about an 120-year deal, I believe, and then by 31st of January just gone, they asked for expressions of interest for people to take over the lease. We were one of more than one, businesses that expressed an interest. We followed that up with a firm bid. We're led to believe that a decision will be made within the next month or so. Are we confident? Yes. Are we overconfident? No. We know that there's other people in for the lease. But it's key to us to get the lease back, to be able to have more of a say and more of a steer on his own destiny. And we've got visions for what we want to do with this stadium, and getting the lease back is the first step towards realising those aspirations and visions. The number one priority for this club is to be sustainable, which we are. We've been sustainable for 4 years. We've made a profit on the last set of accounts. We run 9 teams and we still make a profit, and we want to unlock the potential of Odsor Stadium to help underpin our return to Super League.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you very much, Jason. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. And Jake, if you want to do the final goodbyes.
Yeah, no worries, guys. Don't forget, if you are watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe to our channel. Make sure you come down and get yourself to a Bradford Bulls game, obviously, mate. Any final messages to the fans before we sign off, mate?
Yeah, to us existing fans, there's ups and downs in every season, but we're on an upward trajectory. Stick with us, bring a mate, bring kids. Kids can get in for next to no. the club's going places. There will be ups and downs, but your support is vital. We've got a brilliant coach in Eamon Carroll who were highly sought after, and he's still highly regarded at Super League level. So come down, back Eamon, back the players, back the club. We all want the same thing. We want Bradford to be a sustainable, successful club that gets back into Super League and gets back to full-time playing in front of five-figure crowds.
Awesome. Couldn't have said it better myself, mate. We'll end it here. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate your time, mate.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to meet you both.
Cheers,
Awesome.
thanks.
Cheers.